Guys, I don't think we're ever going to make it to the top of the YouTube natural history video making empire. We're never going to catch up to Leslie the bird nerd, or crime pays but botany doesn't. Never going to get there. Bees of the genus Dianthidium are exclusively American. There are about 29 species altogether, and about 19 species in America north of Mexico. The preponderance of species are in the American Southwest, in the arid desert habitats. In this video, we will take a closer look at 4 species. Dianthidium curvatum is the most widely distributed species in the genus. Dianthidium ulkei, Dianthidium subparvum, and Dianthidium pudicum have ranges limited to the western United States. Like other bees in the family Megachilidae, the females of the genus Dianthidium have concentrated hair bands on the underside of their abdomens that allows them to store large amounts of pollen. Different species have different nesting habits, but all appear to glue aggregations of pebbles together with resin to make nesting cells. The story of Dianthidium begins with the description of its first species in 1854. Frederick Smith, working at the British Museum in London, named one of the American bees brought to him Dianthidium curvatum. His single female specimen was from Georgia. This specimen is from northern Utah. It's a black bee with yellow and orange markings. The markings vary across their considerable range. Curvatum is an aggregate nester, and curvatum females make their resin cells below ground. The males, of course, do not possess the hair patches on the underside of their abdomens like the females. Dianthidium curvatum joins Dianthidium simile in being the only 2 species that can be found east of the Mississippi River. 24 years later, in 1878, Ezra Townsend Cresson described another Dianthidium from Utah collected by Henry Ulkei. Cresson concluded his description with the short compliment, "a beautiful little species," and named his new bee after its collector. Ulkei is found throughout the western United States. Its yellow markings are very variable across its range. It also has variable nesting habits, females selecting pre-existing burrows in soil or hollow twigs to adhere their pebble resin cells. The males have a completely yellow clypeus and, of course, no pollen scopa on the underside of their abdomens. A year later, in 1879, Cresson described another bee in the genus he named Pudicum. He had 2 specimens from Nevada, both of them males, and they were quite small. Pudicum is considerably smaller than either of the 2 species previously described. They adhere their resinous nest cells to surfaces such as rocks. Their color varies from white to yellow. Males are, of course, very small as well, and like all Dianthidium, they have a peculiar 7th tergite. Pudicum is found throughout the western United States and southern Canada. All of my specimens are mountain associated, not alpine, but from mountain canyons between 5,000 and 6,000 feet in elevation. 22 years later, in 1901, the great western hymenopterist Theodore Drew Allison Cockerell created the subgenus Dianthidium within the genus Anthidium. 5 species were placed therein, and the taxon Dianthidium was born. 13 years later, in 1914, Myron Swenk, working at the University of Nebraska, added Dianthidium subparvum to the list of North American Dianthidium. Subparvum is a tiny bit smaller than Ulkei. All the species in this genus sport a very compact look. The head almost seems fused to the thorax, and the same goes for the abdomen. Males follow the same pattern we have seen before, and once again I remind you that there is considerable variation in color over the diverse environments they inhabit. 54 years later, in 1968, Albert Grigorek and Lionel Stange from the University of California, Davis published The Pollen Collecting Bees of the Dianthidium of California. Since the Dianthidium are primarily western, the California species are nearly all of the species. So the work is very useful and comprehensive enough. No attempt to identify specimens should be without this work at hand. 43 years later, in 2011, John Pickering at the University of Georgia, along with John Asher at the American Museum of Natural History, launched Discover Life, a website that offers matrix-based identification guides for all sorts of taxa. Their guides to North American bees are extensive, and they cover 24 species of Dianthidium. Of course, any effort to determine a specimen's identity should start with range maps. Unfortunately, all 4 of these species and several more have greatly overlapping ranges. But only curvatum and a species named simile can be found in parts of the east. So if you found a Dianthidium in Virginia, your job would be easy. Although length won't reveal the identity of your specimen, knowing it might help pare down your list. All the bees in this genus are medium to small. Pudicum is on the small end at about 5 to 7 millimeters, while curvatum is on the large end at 9 to 10 millimeters. As for color, the females appear to have many color differences. Their colors may differ markedly in these 4 specimens, but color differences are often unreliable as they can be variable across their ranges. For example, some ulkei have orange legs, similar to curvatum. Before going any further, you will have to determine your bee's gender. Ventrally, males and females show some noticeable differences. First, females have modified hairs on their legs and a pollen scopa on their abdomens. Males have spines on their hindcoxa and an odd 7th tergite. The faces of the males and females also differ slightly. Males generally have a completely yellow clypeus, while females have a medial interruption. This is not true for all the species in the genus, but it holds up for many. Also, be prepared to inspect the punctation of the fronds in females to distinguish species. The males are far easier to key out than the females. One character on the ventral side of the males is unique to Dianthidium curvatum. The males have spines not only on the hindcoxa, but also the forecoxa. Interestingly, the females have this characteristic as well. The spines are not easy to see and they're in a tough place, but if you manage to see spines on the forecoxa, you probably have curvatum. The males also have a characteristic 7th tergite. It is usually curled up onto the body, but if you can get a good look at it, it will be a powerful clue. Females show differences in thoracic punctation as well as differences in the teeth of their mandibles. Most species have some sort of preapical tooth, but a couple of the smaller ones, including Pudicum, has basically a straight cutting edge.
Well, that should get you started. Good luck.
As always, a special thanks go to the internet resources that make these videos possible, including the Biodiversity Heritage Library, Discover Life, and Iowa State University's Bug Guide. Look for them online.
Leslie would know what that one is.